Good morning. allowing us to come off. Good morning, everyone. This is HSEMA test. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Director. Yes, we can hear you now. We're just trying to make sure everybody is ready to go, and we will get started in just a minute. All right. Good morning, everybody. We are ready to get started. I would like to call to order this public hearing of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. It is 9:45 a.m. on Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. And we are conducting the roundtable virtually and streaming on the DC Council's website and YouTube at CM Brooke Pinto. I'm Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and Chairwoman of the committee. The Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety has oversight responsibility for matters affecting the district courts, criminal law, procedure, and justice, public safety, including policing, violence prevention and intervention, and civilian police oversight, access to justice, including victim services and justice grants, fire and emergency medical services, and the district's 911 and 311 services, forensic science, fatality review and medical examinations, Homeland Security and Emergency Response, Adult and Youth Corrections, Family Law, Probate and Estates, Child Support, and Women's and Gender Policy. Today, the committee is meeting to conduct its second performance oversight hearing for the agencies under its purview. We will hear from the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency and the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. The first agency on today's agenda is the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, or HSEMA. HSEMA's mission is to manage the planning and coordination of the district's emergency response efforts and to ensure the district is prepared to prevent, protect against, respond to, mitigate, and recover from all threats and hazards, whether natural or man-made. HSEMA works towards this mission by developing emergency preparedness plans and procedures in coordination with district agencies, service providers, and private businesses. By maintaining ongoing situational awareness and by disseminating public safety information, alerts, and warnings to district residents. I do want to highlight two particular areas where HSEMA is doing vital work for the district. The first relates to our public health approach to violent crime prevention. Last fall, HSEMA launched Protect DC, a violence prevention program focused on identifying and assessing a person's risk of committing violent crime, working with local and other law enforcement agencies to provide investigative support, and coordinating intervention strategies to prevent violent incidents. HSEMA has also provided training on behavioral threat assessment and management to more than 500 community members to help them identify the warning signs of potential violence. The other area of HSEMA's work I want to highlight is its efforts related to climate resilience. We know that the district already faces increased risks of flooding as well as extreme heat due to climate change, and those risks will only get worse in the future. But HSEMA has been doing very important work to coordinate and get federal funding for projects aimed at reducing these risks. In FY 2021, HSEMA helped the district win over $23 million in federal grants for projects aimed at things like building resilience hubs, building a flood wall at the Blue Plains water treatment plant, and providing financial assistance to homeowners in high-risk areas. Much of this work is done by HSEMA behind the scenes and with little fanfare, but it is hugely important to the district's safety and security going forward. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the agency's efforts on these and other important issues today. Right, I don't see any other colleagues with us, so we will turn to public witnesses, and today we will follow the committee's normal practice and hear from public witnesses first, then followed by our government witnesses. So public witnesses will have 3 minutes to present their testimony. Those who represent organizations will have 5 minutes. We're going to have 3 panels today. Excuse me, this agency, we're going to have 1 panel, and we have 2 public witnesses. If we can let them in as panelists. We have Robert Vincent Branham and John McGregor from the DC Climate Action. All right, and Akima, if we can get the clock up. Okay, and our first witness is a public witness, so we'll have 3 minutes. All right, Mr. Branham, please go ahead.
Thank you. Greetings and salutations, Chairwoman Pinto and members of the committee. Let me not waste time. 1 year ago, almost to the day, I testified before this committee regarding bullying, racism, bigotry, and support for the indecent social idea of white supremacy. I also spoke about workplace toxicity. Today, I will continue my testimony. However, following my testimony of last year, unlike God, this committee left me uncovered and unprotected. Madam Chair, the senior management team of HSEMA, to include the director, needs to be replaced. The committee need not take my word. It should consider the comments contained in the agency climate survey conducted by the DC Department of Human Resources and complaints filed against the agency. In that survey, I am confident the views I expressed at the request of DHR were sustained by others. Yet, after the survey was compiled, DHR reversed its pledge and refused to share its findings publicly and would not allow responders to verify their own comments. Yet it is highly likely it was shared with certain senior officials for personnel retribution and employee retaliation. It is my request to this committee to assist me in getting a copy of this survey to be assured my comments were reflected completely and accurately. Sadly, to protect their paychecks and position, there are those willing to subvert the truth and choose to look the other way to mistreatment of others. Let me say to members of the HSEMA senior management team, seated to the left and to the right of the director, looking down at their notes and laptops, occasionally glancing at one another with silent shame from the words of the gospel at Colonius, think no longer that you are in command here, but rather think how when you were, you served your own destruction. Racial equity, particularly in the workplace, cannot be achieved if management and leadership refuse to see and to walk in the light of truth, honor, and with integrity. February is Black History Month. Some people will try to burnish their honor with historical quotes of Black leaders past. Permit me my own quote of a Black leader past, but not forgotten. Never, never be afraid to do what is right, especially if the well-being of a person is at stake. Society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our souls when we look the other way. Madam Chair, let me state here, as I have said to others, I will not kneel to bullies, racists, bigots, and white supremacists. I never have, and I never will. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Branham. Next, we will hear from John McGregor from DC Climate Action. And since Mr. McGregor represents an organization, he will have 5 minutes to testify. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Pinto. I represent DC Climate Action, a local civic group working in education and advocacy since 2006 to mitigate climate change and adapt to its effects on the district. The District of Columbia is fortunate to have been awarded a grant of nearly $20 million by the Federal Emergency Management Agency for a microgrid that will provide backup power generation at low cost to taxpayers for the district government's St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Ward 8. This single customer microgrid is a DC government public safety and climate resilient project, providing a resilience hub to which surrounding communities can come for power during grid outages and reducing the disaster impact of other emergencies. The district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, in partnership with other district agencies, is in charge of the project. Now, DC Climate Action is concerned about the delays that have held up this microgrid project and the use of the FEMA grant for over a year. Councilmember Allen raised questions about the delay in issuing the RFP in his committee's oversight hearing on HSEMA over a year ago in January 2022. The RFP was issued in June, fortunately. Proposals were finally submitted on schedule in September. And in October, a panel representing all the relevant agencies that includes the Department of General Services, the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, the Department of Energy and Environment, the Office of Unified Communication, and HSEMA, after a careful evaluation process, recommended one of the bidders for the award. That was October. However, DGS has still not awarded the contract, even after the evaluation panel in which it participated made a recommendation. We want to know, why has the contract not been awarded? Why should it take more time to make that award after the panel recommended a winner than the time it took for bidders to prepare their proposals and then have them fully evaluated? Who is holding it up and why? This delay is causing 4 areas of harm. First, every month of delay means postponing the availability of the hospital as a resilience hub or disaster relief hub for key agencies and for the surrounding communities, which are the most vulnerable and underserved in the district. Second, every month of delay means a loss of benefits from the microgrid to the hospital in reduced operating costs, and thus an unnecessary expense for DC taxpayers. Third, the hospital is projected to open in the fall of 2024, and with construction already underway, the longer it takes to award the microgrid contract, the more challenging and quite possibly more expensive it will be to integrate the microgrid into the hospital. And finally, if the delays go on too long, the district may lose a portion of the FEMA grant, which would also call into question the reliability of the district as a partner in such projects. In applying for the federal grant to finance this microgrid, the district committed itself to complete the project in a timely manner. Nothing should further delay the award of the contract. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. McGregor. So I do have a couple of questions for both of you. And Mr. Branham, I'll start with you and the concerning allegations that you raised about the workplace, and just curious of what the basis of your concerns is. Is this something that you've seen firsthand in working at the agency, or through conversations, or through the press?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My observations are direct observations. And in conversations with others at the agencies while I was there, my concerns are not singular to me. They are also can be codified by the complaints filed against the agency by others. By the very fact that the agency that the DHR undertook a survey, 2 surveys of the agency's employee climate. The second was done based on what it found the first time. And in my conversations with the investigators, I was promised that my comments would be I would get an opportunity to see the report and to verify my comments. That didn't happen and has not happened. I did not volunteer to participate in that survey. I was asked to participate in that survey, and I did so, to what may have been great harm to me. But that doesn't matter, because I can take the hit, and I took the hit, because truth matters. Truth crushed to earth shall rise again. But that doesn't seem to be the emphasis of what is the atmosphere of management. Management knows what's going on. They've seen it, they've participated in it, and they've tried it, and they've had some of their actions reversed by DHR. There's no secret.
Mr. Branham, when you talk about personal direct observations, can you elaborate a little bit more? When did you work at the agency and what did you see?
I served at the agency at the beginning, not at the beginning, but appointed by former Mayor Vincent Gray. And I've been there for close to 12 years. And I've seen a great deal.
You still work at HSEMA?
I'm sorry?
You still work at HSEMA?
No, dear, I don't. Excuse me, I didn't mean that as a derogatory comment or whatever. But I'm giving you respect that you do, as chair of the committee. No, I no longer work at I'm no longer a district government employee.
Okay, so when did you work at HSEMA?
At the beginning of 2012 to August of last year.
From 2012 to August of last year?
Yes, 2022.
Okay, so you were there for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, in what capacity?
Community outreach specialist.
And what did you see through your direct observations that you can share with the committee that you're alleging?
It's not my observations is that the employees, there's a double standard in how our employees are treated. There is I was told point blank by previous persons that were there that there was direct action to be taken against me. They refused to do it, so they were removed. They were removed directly. I've had comments come to me from others. Chairwoman, I'm a political person. I make no bones about that, and I make no apologies for that. I'm not going to say I'm high maintenance, but I don't run from bigotry. I don't run from racists, and I don't run from bullies. I don't, and I will not. And it's unfortunate that there are people who feel that they, in order to continue getting their paycheck and positions, they have to be silent to mistreatment of others. There's still mistreatment going on. I get calls occasionally from current employees at HSEMA about wanting advice on how to react to some of the things that's happening. They know they know this is true. They know this. And the climate, I urge you, Madam Chair, to take a look at that climate survey. Take a look at the two employee surveys that were conducted by DHR. This is meaningful. Get a copy of that. Get a copy of that. They would not release. They would not. I was told by the general counsel I could not get it, but they gave it to others who used it against me. Don't get hoodwinked. Don't get bamboozled. Don't get bamboozled.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. I appreciate it. I do have to move on to Mr. McGregor, but I really appreciate you being here and sharing your experience.
I understand that you want to move forward, and I appreciate that. And I value your time, and I value and I respect the others, Mr. McGregor. But I think it is critical that this committee not ignore the report that was done to sustain.
Mr. Branham, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. We hear you. Mr. McGregor, if you're still here, I want to talk about the microgrid and the grant a little bit more. How far behind schedule are we on this project at this point?
Well, I don't know what the original schedule was, but I think the point that's most germane here is that construction is already underway, and the microgrid is intended to be an integral part of the complex. And therefore, as long as people are putting together the rest of the project, delays here are going to make it more difficult to fully integrate this. This was a point that was made by HSEMA itself. And I think that the folks at HSEMA are very much on board trying to get this approved, but there's been a snag somewhere. It seems odd to me that if a recommendation made by that expert committee representing so many of the agencies involved here made its recommendation in October, and now we're more than 3 months beyond that period, there's some spanner in the works here. There's something getting in the way of a normal, expeditious approval. And we'd like to know where that is. What's the problem?
And Mr. McGregor, can you expand on the importance of the microgrid just from a practical standpoint? Why is this so important for the district? Do you know how many homes could be served by the microgrid beyond the hospital?
As a matter of fact, it is it's a single, what you might call single user, single payer microgrid. So those outside communities would be served by it in its capacity as a resilience hub. That means that the microgrid itself doesn't go out and serve homes, for example, in the neighboring community. That would present a problem if it did. Then PEPCO, for example, might have legitimate concerns that this goes beyond, it goes into PEPCO's legitimate territory. But in fact, it's all St. Elizabeth's. It's serving St. Elizabeth's. And if there is a great power outage, people can come there for relief. But the microgrid doesn't go out to those individual homes.
Okay, thank you so much. And are you aware of FEMA ever granting an award of this size before?
Actually, this is the very first award that FEMA has made under this BRIC program. And it's kind of embarrassing if we drop the ball by either not proceeding with it or going so slowly that we miss the main benefits of it.
Mhm.
So we're saying, let's get moving here, you know. Actually, as DC Climate Action, we were also originally attracted to this because of the energy saving, clean energy and energy saving aspects of it. And you know, that's one of the costs of delay that I didn't enumerate, but it's certainly one that concerns us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both for being here and for your testimony. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this.
We are now going to turn to our government witness, Chris Rodriguez, Director of the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. And it is the tradition of this committee to swear in all government witnesses who appear before it. So Director Rodriguez, if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Director Rodriguez to make an opening statement.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Pinto. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this morning. I just want to introduce members of my team who are here, and I want to commend many of them who were here late last night for the State of the Union address, waiting until about a little after 11 o'clock when the president was back at the White House to go home, and then of course come back early for the hearing. I'm going to start to my left. Chief of Staff Jerica Shackelford is here. She oversees our Division of Mission Support. Our Assistant Director for Policy, Performance, and Data, Tristan Reed. Our Senior Program Manager for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Shauna Parks. Our Assistant Director for External Affairs, Julia Christian. To my right, our General Counsel, Dion Black. Chief Administrative Officer for the agency, oversees all our HR and finance functions, Adrian Gill. Our Senior Program Manager for Legislative Affairs, Mr. Tony Goodman. And our Deputy Associate Director for Intelligence oversees our Fusion Center here in the district, Mr. Renaud Scott. Chairwoman, I would like to take just a moment to address the public witnesses. The first on the microgrid, we agree that it is an extremely important project for the district in building resilience, and we'll talk a little bit more about that project during the course of my testimony, but we certainly concur that the faster that we get the RFP awarded to the microgrid operator, the sooner we can start getting those FEMA funds moving so we can build out that capacity. It is the first of its kind in the nation. FEMA is really trying to use this project to award others across the country and really looking to us to be a model for the nation in terms of building that level of resilience. The second, Mr. Branham's testimony, I agree with him. Truth matters. And you know, I just want to clarify some things based on what he said. I would note that Mr. Branham joined HSEMA as an accepted service appointment from the Office of the Mayor, first under Mayor Gray, and then under Mayor Bowser. And while I'm not going to stoop to his level in terms of calling people names, I do want to thank him for his service to HSEMA, as well as the ways in which he chooses to advocate for residents here in the district. Although I am aware of the extensive documentation and multiple reasons why his employment was terminated by the Office of the Mayor in district government last fall, I'm really not permitted to talk about that because that would be a violation of the DPM's privacy provisions to discuss personnel actions. But I do want to make clear that no matter how a person comes to work at HSEMA, my foremost goal is to put those persons in the position to do the best work possible for our residents and the residents of the district. Paramount to this is the maintenance of a respectful, a courteous, and a collegial working environment for persons of all backgrounds. And protected category discrimination has never been part of my personal philosophy, my management philosophy, or my leadership philosophy. I also want to address the climate assessment. Mr. Brandon was incorrect. There were not 2 climate assessments that were done. One was done over 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago. DCHR has not recommended any changes to our management processes and policies, any corrective actions of any kind. And the lack of those recommended changes or corrective actions indicates to me, and I hope our performance and our activities over the last several years in terms of the COVID response and the response to January 6th demonstrates that we have the best workforce in district government and the most talented one. And we work very hard to build that workforce to prepare for the challenges that we face. And I do hope that it reflects the core values of you, council member, which I know it does, and of the mayor and of our district residents. So thank you. I'll turn to my prepared testimony as well. So again, thank you very much, council member and Chairwoman Pinto, for allowing me to testify. My name is Dr. Christopher Rodriguez, and I am the director of the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. As you mentioned in your opening comments, the mission of HSEMA is to ensure DC agencies, businesses, and residents are prepared to prevent, protect against, respond to, mitigate, and recover from all types of threats and hazards. And the ongoing support of our mayor, Muriel Bowser, and the council has been instrumental in our success in fulfilling this mission. Over the past year, our team has responded to a great number and variety of incidents, and while still working to bring together and bring about a greater long-term resilience in our community. For example, just over the last year, a year ago today, we were dealing with the Omicron surge. We also were dealing, and we would deal soon, with trucker convoys. HSEMA has led the coordination of support for migrants arriving in the district from Texas and Arizona starting last spring, and assisted our Department of Human Services in standing up the Office of Migrant Services to build a system that provides services to migrants. Another important initiative that you mentioned in your opening comments is Protect DC, which we launched last September. And this prevention program utilizes a public health approach to assess a person's risk of violence or serious harm, to share information, and to coordinate resources and services. Protect DC is one of a variety of tools in our gun violence and violence prevention citywide efforts on behalf of the mayor. And Protect DC does accept anonymous referrals from community members, and with its multidisciplinary team of behavioral health, human services, law enforcement, and legal professionals. For longer-term resilience planning, we've been preparing an update to the district's community risk assessment, or the CRA. In particular, we have been centering this update on racial equity, because historically what we've seen, not just here in the district, but across the country and across the world, is that not all disasters impact everyone equally. As we saw throughout the COVID pandemic and events like the Talbot Street building failure in Southeast last year, those with the least resources are often the most at risk. And we need to design our plans and perform our work with that in mind. We have been greatly assisted in these efforts by the addition of our equity, diversity and inclusion officer, Shauna Parks, who is here today and I introduced during my opening comment. We look forward to welcoming our new Disability Access and Functional Needs Program Manager in a few weeks, and we are excited about her contributions in these areas. HSEMA continues to coordinate the district's response and recovery from COVID-19. And the district successfully navigated the Omicron surge, as I mentioned, in early 2022. We did this by quickly ramping up and implementing our new action plan. HSEMA helped district partners expand their operations, and notably, as you'll see, the DC Health's Test Yourself program, as well as the opening of COVID centers in each ward of our city to provide free testing and vaccination to residents. And we are building on our lessons learned from COVID, which notably was the largest and most prolonged emergency activation in our city's history. And we have done that by looking at how we can revamp our training protocols to long-term climate change resilience. Our major activity over the past year has been planning for major transformational change that we believe will improve the way we manage incidents and protect district residents. During the early stages of the pandemic, our staff and partners performed very admirably. But we realized that our current facility, where I'm sitting right now, was inadequate to meet our response and coordination needs. We did not have enough space to accommodate all of our district and federal partners, let alone in a socially distanced way. And we actually used the DC Health facility to manage this incident for nearly all of 2020. With the assistance from funds from the mayor and from the council, as well as federal grants, we will cut the ribbon on our new operational and expanded facility later this month. We do hope you'll join us for that, council member. This operations facility in the Navy Yard neighborhood more than doubles the size of the district's emergency operations center and our intelligence fusion center, while adding additional rooms that can house our local, regional, and federal partners, as well as the mayor and her cabinet during incidents and events. And now we plan this project around three primary principles: functionality, flexibility, and wellness. There are dozens of large screens for providing essential information, multiple options for network connectivity, wheel tables that can be reconfigured as needed, and a wide variety of seating and break areas for our staff to reset during stressful activations. Our entire agency will temporarily move to Navy Yard this year to allow us to renovate our existing facility here in Ward 8 in Anacostia, which will eventually serve as our administrative hub and the district's backup operational and intelligence center. While we operate and activate 24/7 and activate for events and incidents, during most times at our new facility, our large meeting spaces will be available for trainings, preparedness, and meetings for HSEMA and other district and federal agencies. We have already hosted classes for DCHR, and we've scheduled a busy next few months of trainings and events for other district, local, regional, and federal partners, such as FEMA and DHS. While we are excited about our new intelligence and operations facility, we are equally excited to be nearing the end of a 4-year project to reevaluate and update our emergency preparedness doctrine. HSEMA and our partners have endeavored to update all of our emergency preparedness, response, and recovery planning to more clearly align with how we manage incidents here in the district. And again, we've learned a lot from the pandemic. What began as a routine planning update process in 2019 grew in scope and intensity as we incorporate lessons learned throughout the tumultuous years of 2020 and 2021. In FY23, we will continue to collaborate with our partners and roll out updated plans, improved and customized training, and new and challenging exercises. These efforts will ensure that the District of Columbia and HSEMA remain a national leader in homeland security and emergency management. Now, this shift in organizational philosophy will require our team to revise existing training and devise new ones. We will also launch a new qualification system to ensure all HSEMA staff and other agency liaisons have demonstrated knowledge and experience in the necessary behaviors and tasks to serve the Emergency Operations Center. HSEMA is increasingly pushing the boundaries of traditional emergency management and implementing solutions that build resilient infrastructure and communities. I would like to take time to highlight our efforts in strengthening DC's resiliency, led by the district's Chief Resilience Officer, Melissa Diaz. Our team is actively working on projects that buy down risk through our hazard mitigation program. In partnership with DGS, DOEE, and DEMVET, as was mentioned previously, and I look forward to discussing, we are implementing a microgrid at St. Elizabeth's campus, ensuring critical assets, including the new hospital, the men's shelter, and the Office of Unified Communications, as well as HSEMA here at 2720 MLK, can maintain power in all situations. This project will also create cost savings and reduce energy emissions. Additionally, HSEMA is supporting stormwater retention parks in Southwest to address interior flooding and heat. both expected to become more severe due to climate change. This year, HSEMA was awarded another $23 million in federal funding to the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC grants. We are one of the most successful jurisdictions in the country for winning these competitive grants. And I want to thank my team for all the hard work that they've done to do that. We are even more successful than many large states across the country in getting these projects approved. This year's funding will help complete the flood wall surrounding the Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant, the largest in the world, protecting this critical asset from predicted sea level rise. Funding will also supplement the district's investment in the Flood Smart Homes program that seeks to minimize residential risk of flooding. Another area of resilience focus is supply chains for critical commodities. Over the last 4 years, HSEMA has leveraged $4 million in direct and indirect federal support to analyze the supply chains that bring food, water, petroleum fuel, and healthcare supplies into the DC region. Because these are essential to daily life, understanding how these systems work and how they can be disrupted is helping us build resilience through improved planning and targeted capital investments. In 2023, HSEMA will be working with local, regional, and federal partners to begin implementing the findings from these analyses with an eye towards strengthening our collective capacity to increase supply chain resilience. While we actively manage existing projects, we also keep our eyes on the future, strategically leveraging federal funds to create a pipeline for future mitigation projects. When we develop these applications, HSEMA prioritizes equity and identifying projects that benefit residents disproportionately impacted by natural hazards. This often involves asking our federal partners to trust us when we push the bounds of the typical projects that they fund. This year, we're looking at options for restoring tidal wetlands in Kenilworth Park, assessing if a living shoreline can be used to mitigate flooding in Buzzard Point, and the viability of DPR rec centers to serve as community resilience hubs. We're also awarded $1.4 million to support cross-jurisdictional blue-green infrastructure planning and community engagement in partnership with PG County to support disadvantaged communities with elevated flood risk. When the district's Resilient DC program came to HSEMA in 2019, it really opened the door for the agency to think about the big picture. How do housing, educational opportunities, and our economic outlook impact our preparedness for disasters and threats? What will our risk look like in the future, given the changing climate? As already outlined, we are using federal funding as much as possible for this work. However, this federal funding is largely limited to addressing risks from natural hazards to property. To make progress on the other elements of Resilient DC, we rely on partnerships and the efforts of our sister agencies. As you can see in our 2022 Resilient DC Progress Report, this is working most of the time, but there is room for further HSEMA leadership and leadership from other district agencies. Our priorities for long-term resilience include investing in community preparedness education programs, addressing the unique needs of those with disabilities or access and functional needs, improving the ability of residents to get where they need to go in the district safely during blue sky and gray sky days, and ensuring that the digital divide and other barriers are not preventing people from accessing important and life-saving social services. I am very proud of the work our agency does to help keep our residents safe and prepared. The district faces a wide array of short and long-term challenges, and our excellent, well-trained, and passionate staff are fully capable of taking on this essential work. While I'm here, I would also like to thank my staff for the tremendous work that they've done over the last 2 years. The events that we've experienced with the pandemic, with social unrest, and certainly with January 6th has left an indelible mark on our agency, and our employees really do deserve a deep and appreciative thank you for all the things that they do to keep our residents safe. Finally, I would like to thank the mayor for her leadership on these issues, and for the council and to the council for its support in these continuing challenging times. We're thankful for the opportunity to serve the district's residents and our visitors. This concludes my testimony, Madam Chairwoman, and my staff and I are available to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that, Director Rodriguez, and thank you to you and your whole team for all of your efforts these last few years. And I'll echo my thanks for your work last night in keeping President and all of our city safe. So I want to start with learning more about the violence prevention efforts that HSEMA has been more directly involved with lately. Violent crime is the #1 concern of mine and this committee, and it is on the minds of so many district residents. And we have a number of agencies, including MPD, but beyond MPD, that are focused on violence prevention and reduction. And not everybody always thinks about HSEMA as one of those agencies. But HSEMA has been engaged in some of our coordination efforts, initially by detailing an employee to the Building Blocks DC initiative, and then later by establishing the Protect DC program. So I want to learn a little bit more about both of those pieces. Can you talk about HSEMA's role in Building Blocks DC? Did the agency have any participation beyond detailing one employee to this initiative? And what was the thinking behind having HSEMA's involvement in that initiative?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Pinto, for the question. I think it's an important one. In terms of Building Blocks, when that program was stood up, I believe in late 2020, early 2021, HSEMA actually detailed more employees to that initiative than any other district agency. We had about 12 to 15 employees actively engaged in standing up that capability. Most of it was because of our success in organizing and coordinating a multi-agency response as we did during the COVID pandemic. I think city leadership really looks to HSEMA to coordinate and organize multi-agency efforts, and Building Blocks was no exception. We had employees detailed to Building Blocks for about a year in helping to establish that office and helping to establish just the processes and policies that were involved in how to report, how to get information where it needed to go, and how to support city leadership in their decision making. When we were confident that Director Linda Harley Harper had everything she needed to be able to build a long-term sustained office within the Office of the City Administrator, HSEMA kept a couple employees detailed to her to ensure that she had the support she needed in order to make that office permanent. That rotation or that detail ended with the last employee who was there to really assist her as we recognized that she was growing her office and she was getting funding for it, and she was being able to hire the people she needed to hire to be successful. At that point, our role in the violence prevention, citywide violence prevention effort championed by the mayor was really to look at Protect DC. And it really is a prevention program that utilizes mostly a public health approach to identify and assess a person's risk of violence. It took several months for us to make sure that we had the buy-in, not just at the city leadership level, but also with our partners in terms of getting everyone in the same room and holding regular meetings with not just a law enforcement audience, but with a public health and behavioral health audience. And I'm really proud to say that our team was really entrepreneurial in looking for federal funds to stand up that capability. And we did so through the Department of Homeland Security's targeted violence and terrorism prevention grant program. We're able to get, I believe, about 1.4 million in initial funding to hire people and to put structure around that program. It launched in September, this past September, and to date, we've received 47 referrals from government partners, private industry, and community members. And the program already has had several accomplishments. It has provided investigative support to MPD, detectives, and other law enforcement partners. It's provided training, as you mentioned earlier, Chairwoman, on behavioral threat assessments and management to over about 545 community members so that they can see how to identify risks and warning signs for violence. We've also performed 2 physical security assessments for schools, so working very closely with DCPS in partnership with the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. And so we're going to continue to grow that program, apply for additional federal funding to make sure that we are supporting the mayor's program as well as our collective efforts to push down violence in the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And you talk about the 47 referrals. What type of violence is this work targeting? Is there a particular category of violent or concerning behavior that's being referred to this program versus working with any of our other gun violence prevention services through the Office of Gun Violence Prevention or the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement or MPD or others?
As I mentioned, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. The 47 cases are a variety of individuals who, again, community members, government agencies assess are at risk. So it is a prevention program. And it's not about taking punitive action. It's not about getting someone to a law enforcement agency for investigations. It's about providing support to people who a community or an organization might view as at risk of going down the wrong path. It really provides an off-ramp for people. And I think the part of our challenge now, and with your help and with your support, we'd like for people to know more about it and to know that there's a program out there that can support our community.
Well, thank you. And I hear you there. I guess what I'm trying to understand is the level of coordination between HSEMA and the other DC agencies who are similarly doing violence prevention and interruption work, and if there's data sharing, whether that's the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement or the Office of Gun Violence Prevention or DCPS or DYRS. There's so many agencies that are focused and have in the last 3 years focused additional resources on violence prevention. But is there a level of coordination between your program and what these other agencies are also doing in the same space or a similar space? Absolutely.
All those agencies that you mentioned, ONSE, DYRS, DCPS, DBH, DC Health, DHS, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, so Director Harley Harper's office, they all sit on that advisory board, which meets monthly, to review cases and to make sure, that's HSEMA's role, is to ensure coordination and unity of effort across other district agencies. So Protect DC provides that forum for all those agencies to come together and to share information and make sure we're doing so in a coordinated way.
Okay, and at those monthly meetings, has there been developed a routinized manner to track data and track levels of success with the people that you're identifying and offering services to determine if those services have been effective insofar as there not being a violent incident after those have been delivered?
Yes, my staff corrected me. There's actually bi-weekly meetings of that group of people who share information on referrals and active cases and get down into the nitty-gritty, into the very detailed services that an individual needs in order to, again, off-ramp from violence. So yes, that happens on a bi-weekly basis, reviewing actual cases and referrals. And
tracking the data of what those cases look like.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. And so is it at these bi-weekly meetings that in your coordination role, you help determine which agency's violence prevention effort will be best suited for that referral?
Yes, and to hold those agencies to account for delivery of services, to make sure that, ONSE, where do you stand on this? DYRS, where do you stand on this? DBH, how are we doing with this case? So HSEMA's role is to really, again, ensure that coordination and make sure that agencies are held accountable to the deliverables that they promised.
Okay, great. Because that is something that we'll be having further conversations with all of those agencies that we mentioned about their data tracking. And so that is good to hear that HSEMA's kind of coordination role is helping ensure that there's consistency for some of that data management. So look forward to working with you all on that.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about your HSEMA's work in coordinating between federal and local law enforcement partners to avoid other incidents of violent crime?
Yes, our role is to be a convener of federal, state, regional, and local law enforcement, emergency management, homeland security entities. So as you will see when you come to tour our new facility, we built spaces for federal agencies like the FBI, Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, Capitol Police, Park Police. And so we want to make sure that those federal agents, and we've wired the whole facility to be able for them to come in and to plug in. Because one of the things that we know when we are dealing with a crisis or an emergency that spans local, state, and federal, we need a place to go and we need a place to coordinate. Now, at the federal level, there are sort of structures and avenues that can help us do that. Like last night was a national special security event, which I know you're familiar with. And in that case, the Secret Service is the lead federal agency. So we send representatives to their multi-agency coordination center during those types of events. But for events that don't rise to the level of an NSSE, a National Special Security event, we imagine or we envision that our new facility can be the hub for intelligence and information sharing during a threat, during an emergency, or during an emerging event. We have also really doubled down on training and exercise with our federal partners. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit in on a tabletop exercise simulating a terrorist attack in the district with our federal partners, and how we would all communicate and how we would all coordinate under those circumstances. And that was facilitated by our Fusion Center as well as the National Counterterrorism Center. So we are continuing to do that and to practice and to test our response and our intelligence sharing mechanisms so that we can refine and make sure that people are getting the information that they need.
Okay, thank you very much. And speaking of disseminating information to folks, how has Alert DC been going? Have you seen a major uptick in people who have registered for those updates? It's a continuing challenge that I hear from residents about when these events are happening, and street blockades go on. People understand that security comes first, but want to be made aware of what that's going to mean for traffic diversion, what that's going to mean for their small business, if people will be able to access it. And I know Alert DC is one of the tools to disseminate that information effectively, but have you seen an uptake, and are there any other strategies that you all have considered to reach more residents on a timely basis?
Yes, we have seen a steady increase in Alert DC subscribers. We are up nearing, well, I think 130,000 subscribers. So I think we have a good reach, but we need to keep pushing Alert DC and make sure that we're messaging that to our residents, because that is the primary way that we communicate with our residents during mostly blue and gray sky days. We have other ways of doing that during emergencies, which you're aware of, the wireless emergency alert, where we can blanket the city with a particular message. The last time we used that, I believe it was on January 6th, twice. 2021. And we just, I've been talking to our Assistant Director for External Affairs about how we can continue to do that. We've just hired a new social media manager, and we're increasing our presence on social. And we are also including new platforms to disseminate the Alert DC message, to sign up for it, Instagram, Nextdoor, for example. And so we're going to continue doing that to make sure, and again, with help from the council as well, to disseminate those messages.
Okay, thank you. So your pre-hearing question responses talked about Protect DC and these anonymous referrals from community members. What's the thinking behind routing those tips through HSEMA? Do you think that HSEMA can play a larger role here in collecting tips that are coming in from community members and then making a determination as to which agency should be receiving what in a manner that MPD may not be able to do, or people may not be as likely to send to MPD? Is that a role that you're considering expanding?
Well, certainly I'd like to discuss with the new Deputy Mayor for Public Safety about how HSEMA can continue to bring value to the mayors overall in our collective overall violence prevention strategy. We're open to how we would go about doing that. The important thing that we really wanted to stress with Protect DC is, if people are in an emergency or experiencing a crisis, they need to call 911. Protect DC is really, we talk about in Homeland Security, to the left of an incident. This is really to the left of an incident. It's a prevention program. In some cases, it's very difficult to measure success in the prevention space, right? We try to use a series of measurements, such as types of services and resources, priority levels of the case, and how long a case stays at a certain level. But we do a lot of like tips and offering people opportunities or residents opportunities to report suspicious activity. We do that through our See Something, Say Something program, which is done in coordination with MPD. But certainly any way that you want, we think collectively that we'd be of greater value, we're always open to. And I think my chief of staff would also like to add something.
Yeah, just to speak to your question specifically about how HSEMA can help versus MPD. One of the things that sort of the study and the research shows that people are hesitant to raise cases or folks in their community or their families of concern to law enforcement, because that seems sort of like a worst case scenario for the person that they really just want to get help. So a lot of the background of Protect DC is having another place where you can provide information so that those wraparound services, not necessarily law enforcement, are used as intervention tools for the folks. And it's the distinction of why HSEMA has sort of stepped up and wanted to coordinate in this space, and hope that we can continue to have support to do that, so that we have a very clear and public way to say, we're offering these other services as a city, and law enforcement is not our first answer to any sort of concerns that residents or neighbors or family members might bring forward.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that perspective and additional context. And I think is another way that we should think about expanding HSEMA's role for a broader intake for some of these concerns, and also could lighten the load of MPD a little bit in managing what is in need of their intervention and what's in need of other services. So looking forward to working with you all on that this year. So let's turn to some of the climate resilience work and the microgrid. So I want to start by asking you about one of the most important recent efforts related to resilience. As we've talked a little bit about today, in 2020, with HSEMA's help, the district won a $20 million grant from FEMA to construct a microgrid at the new St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Southeast, which is, a small local version of a power plant, an electric grid, which was a huge win for the district. And the microgrid would allow the hospital to keep functioning in the event of a grid outage. And it would reduce the district's greenhouse gas emissions by incorporating solar panels and energy efficiency measures. But we're now here almost 3 years since the grant was awarded, and we still haven't seen the contract to the microgrid or broken ground on the project. And St. Elizabeth Hospital is projected to open in the fall of 2024. And as some of your responses, Director, to the pre-hearing questions noted, the longer that it takes to get a project off the ground, the harder it becomes to integrate the microgrid into the hospital. So time really is of the essence. So with that background in mind, what is your what is the current state of the microgrid project? I understand that a panel evaluating contract bids recommended a contractor to DGS in October of last year, close to 4 months ago. Do you expect that contract will be awarded soon? Can you elaborate a little bit on what some of the holdups are?
Thank you, Chairwoman Pinto. So just want to back up for a second and answer your question. Yes, we were very excited to be the only jurisdiction in the nation to be awarded a microgrid at that level of funding, $20 million. I think we were, in terms of aggregate money that was brought into the BRIC program, number 4 in the nation. We were ahead of states like New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and our team really worked hard with DGS, with DOEE, with DMPET to put together a solid application and project plan. When we were awarded the project, as you mentioned, we went through the RFP process last summer, and a panel of experts from the agencies selected a vendor to award the project to. And we are waiting for DGS to award that RFP. I regularly check in with them to make sure that they have everything they need from HSEMA. It's important to note, HSEMA is not the project lead. We are the sort of the fiduciary agent for the grant. We are the primary liaison to FEMA. This is a DGS project with support from us and from DOEE and DMPET as well. So we are as anxious as you are to make sure that that project moves forward and the award is issued so that we can begin to build, the first of its kind in the nation and provide needed resilience to a community that is at risk. And particularly in Ward 8, we want to make sure that we are providing that type of service. So I am as anxious as you are, Council Member. I will continue to push to make sure that this RFP is awarded.
Well, thank you so much. We will certainly join you in that push. And not only is this project so important, but I think as we continue to ask the federal government to invest in the district and to consider us for these really important grants, we have to move forward in an expeditious manner to demonstrate how effective these dollars will be. And so looking forward to join you in pushing on that with DGS. So once the contract is awarded, let's assume that happens soon, what will the process be? They'll go through a design phase. When will construction begin? What's the expected next steps, assuming the contract is awarded?
I can take that one. So once the contract is awarded, the hospital has already actually laid the groundwork for connectivity to the microgrid. So the microgrid partner would help us with the design phase. There is an environmental and historical preservation review that we have to do as part of the federal award with FEMA. We've tried to start doing as much research of that as we can without having the microgrid partner on board with us. But the first step with that is getting those design plans in place, getting through that EHP process with FEMA for them to hopefully approve seamlessly the plans that we have for the microgrid. And then we'll be able to begin the construction phase. FEMA will release the additional tranche of money that they have set aside. It's important to know that that money has been allocated to us, but it comes in phases as we demonstrate check marks in the program's progress. So we are eager to start the construction as soon as we can get through those FEMA approvals with the design plans and the EHP review. And the hospital is sort of standing ready with the connections from their side to be able to seamlessly plug into the microgrid once we're able to get that started.
And I think, Chairwoman Pinto, it's also important to note that the hospital is already spending to lay pipes and wires to connect into the microgrid, which really, underscores to us the importance of getting the RFP awarded. And they're estimating that the integration costs are about $3 million. So we really need to make sure, and again, share your desire to get this awarded.
And with the opening of the hospital date of fall of 2024, is there a date by which the contract needs to be awarded to make sure that the microgrid's timeline is on track with the hospital opening date?
So with that, because the hospital has started the connections necessary to attach the microgrid, we don't have a hard and fast date that we won't be able to connect if we don't make those targets. Of course, we want to hit them as soon as possible because that's when the cost saving starts, that's when the resiliency starts for the hospital. But the way the microgrid is set up now is it is the backup power source. So it won't delay the opening of the hospital or any of that in any way because PEPCO is the primary source, but it can be connected and switched over seamlessly at any time for the connectivity.
Okay. And what's the worst case scenario here if DGS forward? Are we at risk of losing the entire grant?
Honestly, yes. We do have to be able to move the RFP forward in order to get the next funding that will help support the project and the microgrid partner. So it is critical that we can move forward with the RFP as soon as possible.
And has FEMA set a timeline that needs to move forward before action's taken?
Not at this point. They're very supportive of the project, and so they understand that this is a big endeavor for the city to take on, and there's a lot of moving parts. We do have wiggle room in our overall federal period of performance, so we're not in jeopardy at that point, but we obviously don't want to abuse the relationship that we have with FEMA in getting this project on track.
Okay. And can we just zoom out a little bit and talk about the idea behind this project, what the benefit of a microgrid at St. Elizabeth campus is? Why did FEMA offer this grant? Why did we apply for it?
Yeah, I'll try to do my best and check in with our Chief Resilience Officer if I get anything wrong. But as you know, we actually had something happen, I want to say it was 2016 or so, where we had a generator or a power outage here at this facility with the 911 call center as well as HSEMA. And it raised some of the gaps that we had to have backup power, more than just the generators that we have at the facility, but for sustained operations for those sort of critical functions. As you know, the men's shelter and now the St. Elizabeth's Hospital and that entire campus there. It's a lot of district resources in one place that are critical resources, the men's shelter, the hospital, the 911 call center, our backup facility, that if we were in an emergency, we obviously want to be able to sustain these facilities. In sort of coordination in DOE's role in supporting this project with DGS, HSEMA, and DMPED has been sort of the climate resiliency part of it, the cost savings to the residents of the district. One of the stats that was really surprising but encouraging is that long-term, the cost savings that we could benefit from the microgrid could be enough to fund an additional floor of the hospital, which is very clearly a benefit to the residents that if we had either a surge event or just a regular, well, COVID isn't regular, but something like COVID where you need a lot of hospital beds and capacity to support the community in a hospital that we know is very much needed in Ward 8, this would really just sort of bolster our abilities to support something like that. So FEMA was very interested in sort of the mixed use sort of component of being able to support emergency operations, our call center, a men's shelter, a hospital, all in the area that we've identified in our CRA and other assessments over years that this is a community that needs the support the most. And if we're able to be successful in a project on this scale like this, that there are opportunities for us to hopefully replicate it in other places in the district, but also nationwide. Our Chief Resilience Officer has spoke about this microgrid project at a lot of different forums in the last year. And our partners at city, state levels are very interested in how we're navigating this process because they have communities that would benefit from a project like this as well. So there's a ton of benefits, both from the climate side, the resiliency side, the impact to residents, and really providing the best services that we can for our Ward 8 residents.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It is clearly a very important project on its own merits. And as I noted, important to continue moving forward when we are awarded this type of monumental grant. And so we will keep pushing on that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit more broadly about some of HSEMA's climate resilience efforts. As I mentioned in my opening comments, HSEMA has been very effective at helping district residents win district grants, federal grants, excuse me, to support our climate resilience efforts. And so I want to understand a bit more about your process. What are we doing right? How do we ensure that we continue to be competitive in winning these grants and ensuring that our climate resiliency efforts are first in the nation?
So one of the things that we're, I think, doing well in this space, Chris mentioned in his testimony, the community resilience assessment, or CRA, which was a big undertaking we've been doing in the last couple of years. That report is full of data that tells us things that we need to know about the city, how heat, how flooding, how climate change not only impacts residents, but businesses. One of the reasons that we've been able to be successful in our Ask of FEMA is that we have the data and the research behind us to be able to really make the strong case. We're not saying theoretically climate is getting worse and therefore all of the impacts are getting worse. We're able to point to data that is strong, that supports what those impacts are. We're able to point to things like this flooding that we had in September of 2020 that had a significant impact on residents, and what that meant for a cost perspective, what that meant for residents that were maybe uninsured or were renters and didn't have coverage with their tenants, and the adverse effects of that. So our success is really relying on the sort of due diligence and works that we've done on really understanding the community and having the data to support it.
And Chairwoman, I also add to what Jericho was saying, was, in terms of the microgrid, for example, we take a very data heavy approach to our projects. This neighborhood, which we're sitting in right now, was chosen because DC Health had found that Ward 8 has a life expectancy 20 years shorter than Ward 3, for example. And so, the more that we can do to put projects into our communities that are more affected by disasters and threats and emergencies is absolutely critical. We're also investing, as I mentioned, Ms. Parks is here with Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer to look at how we're soliciting projects from our district partners and making sure that we're doing so in an equitable way across the city and really pouring those resources into areas of the city that need it.
Absolutely, thank you. And that is just absolutely haunting statistic. Can you talk a little bit, Director, about our flood preparation work? Sometimes it's harder to make the argument for preventative investments in all categories in our city, but especially with the climate and the environment, there's often some pushback. And so can you elaborate so the record is clear about why some of these flood prevention efforts are so important to saving lives and dollars?
Absolutely, because we're seeing it, and we know, and we have the maps and we have the data. We know when there is a rain event in the city, what areas of the city will flood. We know that down to the street level. And we can pre-position resources around those areas to make sure that roads, if they are or need to be closed, can be reopened quickly. And we do that in coordination with DPW, with TDOT, with NPD. We also know there are certain parts of our city along our coastline where we can have riverine flooding. We can have that type of disruption to our city, and so we're very focused as we go through hazard mitigation and our BRIC program and the BRIC program to looking at projects that address those issues in flooding. And I know in our background materials that we submitted to you, we have several projects in Kenilworth, Buzzard Point, in looking at how we can do studies initially and then pour resources into mitigating the effects of flooding. So that is something that we're really focused on, and one that we were successful just this year with the Blue Plains project. That Blue Plains, I'm sure many residents know this, but it is the largest wastewater treatment facility in the world, and it provides water treatment for the entire district. And so it is critically important to make sure that that facility is not prone to flooding and is made resilient from that. because of the importance of our water supply. We're also doing flood prevention in Southwest and Watts Branch, where we have the highest number of residents living in the floodplain. And so again, really targeting those areas that we know are prone to flooding and doing things that we can to mitigate it.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of Blue Plains, can you talk about the grant for the flood wall at Blue Plains and the importance of that project?
Yes, absolutely. So we have received a little over $20 million in federal funding for that project. And it's being managed by DC Water. So we work with DC Water to apply for the grant and to make sure that FEMA had everything it needed to approve it. It does support construction of a flood wall around the wastewater treatment plant, and that will certainly enhance its resilience against anticipated seawater level rise. Now, what we do from HSEMA is we do provide quarterly technical assistance and scope development support to DC Water as needed. We are awaiting the award from FEMA after Build America, Buy America Act waiver is approved. And following the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there was a new purchasing reference for American-made products, as you know, applied to FEMA programs. So we are waiting for that to be on blanket waivers for the infrastructure projects, such as this one, before we receive the money.
Okay, great. And you mentioned Buzzard Point. I understand that we got a large grant to develop a flood resilience strategy for that area, which of course is an area that's going to see a lot of development in the next few years, which makes it all the more important that we do what we can now to mitigate flooding. What level of flood risk are we seeing at Buzzard Point, and what is our plan for ensuring that this is a place where people can live without fear of flooding?
Yeah, no, I mean, Buzzard Point is a known area of the city that does flood pretty often, and with not a lot of rain. And so one of the things that we did in working with DDOT, which is the primary sort of project manager for these efforts, is we applied for some federal grants. We got a little over $200,000 for DDOT to begin identifying and procuring contract support to conduct a study that will ultimately result in a comprehensive flood protection plan along Buzzard Point. Because we do know there will be development there. We're really looking at how we can reduce building and property damage, as well as protect the area. As you know, the area's transportation infrastructure. So again, we will provide technical assistance and coordination support, and we do participate in the Anacostia Waterfront Working Group, which is a multi-agency effort to make sure that, again, we are putting the resources where they need to be.
Okay, thank you. Looking forward to hearing more about that plan that continues to develop or continues to be implemented. So aside from flooding, one of the other greatest direct threats to public well-being from climate change, and that it's exacerbating, is extreme heat, which is a particularly significant issue in dense urban areas like the district, where the urban heat island effect amplifies hot weather. Can you talk a little bit more about HSEMA's efforts to address urban heat, and in particular, how is HSEMA working to protect our seniors and low-income residents, some of whom may not have air conditioning in their homes?
Yes, I mean, this is a big issue, and one that we are really focused on. And addressing the urban heat island at the neighborhood scale is really an objective of Resilient DC. That remains one of our priorities. Getting heat mitigation projects through FEMA and funded through FEMA, it does remain a challenge, but we have succeeded by incorporating heat reduction goals into many of our project proposals. I'll give you an example. We have funded a project with OP, with the Office of Planning and DPR, to develop a tool to assess the ability of small parks to mitigate both flooding and heat. Our blue-green infrastructure project in the Southwest neighborhood will reduce flooding, but also provide benefits for heat reduction. We're also working closely with DOEE to develop the Keep Cool DC plan, which identifies strategies for reducing the urban heat island and ensuring that residents can stay safe during high heat events. Central to this is really community education. And, we had, particularly, I believe it was in late July of last year, a period of many days when there was extreme heat, and making sure, again, that our cooling centers are open, that residents can access the maps where they are. We're working with DPR and DGS to make sure they have staffing and the resources needed to have personnel there. We're also, through our Ready DC initiative, really pushing public messaging through that with community focus groups and interviews to improve how we talk about risks from heat. And so we're just going to continue working on it. We're prioritizing it and working with FEMA to see where we can get future funding for reducing the effects of extreme heat.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I want to turn now and talk a little bit about workplace culture. So can you talk about some of your efforts at the agency to build an inclusive workplace culture, and also if there are any outstanding investigations that are active against the agency or you?
Yep, so there are no investigations active against the HSEMA or any of our employees. So there's no investigations. One of the things that we've really tried to do, and particularly what we saw was during the pandemic, and certainly during the social unrest we saw in 2020 and 2021, is checking in with our employees and making sure that they have the supports that they need in order to persist through the emergencies that we faced. I just want to point out, and I think we talked about this before, HSEMA did not telework during COVID. Our employees showed up in person every day for the majority of 2020 to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 on the community. So, I want to thank my employees for doing that. They did that at great personal risk to themselves, and I would argue to their families, but they showed up at the office. And they were on the front lines really of a fight against, we talk about an invisible enemy, and helping DC Health and assisting their efforts in building the infrastructure that was needed to prepare for a large scale and prolonged disaster that could have serious implications. Recall in early 2020, we didn't know what we were dealing with, and a lot of people were scared. But our employees here at HSEMA, they didn't complain. They showed up and they did the job that was asked of them. I think, to your point, Chairwoman, that takes a toll on people. I think that as we went through 2020 and we saw what was perhaps the most divisive presidential election, and certainly in my lifetime, as well as the impacts of the murder of George Floyd and what we saw in the streets of our city, our employees were on the front lines of that response. So handling the global pandemic, handling the social unrest, going into the fall, knowing throughout the fall that we would be facing a divisive election no matter who won. And then, of course, the protests we saw in November and December of 2020, culminating with January 6th, all the investigations and the aftermath of January 6th at the federal level, our employees are burned out and they're tired. And they are, they're people too, and they have strong feelings about their community and serving it. So when you talk about workplace culture, one of the things that we've really tried to do here at HSEMA is make sure that we're being flexible with our employees, that if people need to take time, if they need to take leave, if they need to take FMLA, if they need to telework for a certain period of time, we give them the opportunity to do that because we ask a lot of them. And I do understand that, stress and burnout can cause people to get angry, it can cause people to get resentful, right? But we do our best with this team around me that's sitting at this table. We do our best to check in with our folks to make sure they have the things they need to be successful in their jobs. Our new facility, I mentioned, one of the core values of that is wellness. We have, and I look forward to having you tour it. We have 2 wellness rooms. We have areas where employees can relax and have a casual conversation. Personal phone booths they can go in to take a personal call if they work in like a cubicle area. We really were intentional about making sure that our employees are taken care of and that they're serving in a workplace that rewards and recognizes their accomplishments.
Thank you. How many employees are currently at HSEMA?
When we're at full staff, Adrian, you can tell me it's 142?
Yeah, that's right. We currently have 120.
120. So we have about 22 vacancies, I would say, Adrian?
24.
24 vacancies.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about your policy for performance evaluations?
Yeah, so Chairwoman, so obviously we follow the DPM and DCHR's guidance on performance evaluations. One of the standards that we have for our managers is their performance is relying on making sure that they've done performance discussions for all of their direct staff. We really seek to, and I think we have in the last couple of years for sure, had 100% compliance on our performance, or close to 98% on our performance evaluations, making sure one of the things that's very important to us and to me specifically in my chief of staff hat is that people are getting the opportunity whenever they're performing well to be incentivized for it, making sure they're getting their step increases, their performance allowances, whatever it is that they might be eligible for. This year in particular, we've done an incredible job of having our CAO, Adrian, she pulled a report after the performance period, and we went through and evaluated everybody that rated favorably to be eligible for some type of increase, based on where they are in their service, if they're in probationary period, where their last increase was. And we made it a policy and made decisions, leveraging our budget in the best way that we could to make sure that everyone who was eligible for an increase got one. It wasn't specific to your manager, your division, your bureau. It was really, did you rate in a way that you're eligible for an increase, and then doing that follow-up with management to make sure that that's carried out. Something that I've seen over my time here and different leadership changeovers is that it was really relying on the managers to be proactive about doing that, or even sometimes for the staff to advocate for it. And there's a big education piece to working in a local government and knowing what the rules are and how to navigate those sorts of things. And if you're not educated on how to do that, staff can fall behind on maybe getting what's owed to them, especially after a great performance year. So we wanted to get ahead of that, and we're able to really do it wholesale this year to make sure that there were no questions, that everybody was clear that if they were eligible, that increases were coming, especially after Director Rodriguez mentioned how much people have sort of stepped up to the front lines and done great work. We didn't want there to be sort of any uncertainty for folks about what was coming next, to show our appreciation for the work that everyone's done.
And to underscore that point, Chairwoman, talk about workplace culture. We believe in servant leadership. So what I mean by that is our managers won't get their performance bonuses that they're eligible for until all their eligible employees do. So we want to make sure that our managers are doing that most critical function of leadership, which is, recognizing people's performance. And if someone is eligible, there's no reason why you should not be putting in paperwork to get people their quality step increase or a performance bonus. And only until your employees get it, will you get it.
Okay, thank you. And is there any training associated or provided to the managers about how performance evaluations should be conducted, and examples of what constitutes a certain rating?
Sure, I can add to that. Yes, any employee who is appointed as a manager in the District of Columbia government, of course, has to take a series of management specific trainings. One of those courses includes performance management. So it is a very detailed and structured training that explains how you are to develop your SMART goals, how you are to communicate, how employees are progressing towards their SMART goals, and also how to properly rate your employees at the end of the year to ensure that the evaluation is objective.
Okay, and has that been in place since your time as the director?
Yeah, and we have, and again, with Adrian's help, with Jerica's help, and some of the folks around this table, when I started as director, we really took a look at how we did performance evaluations, because we had a lot of employees who didn't know what their job was. And when they were rated, not all, but many, enough that when they were rated, they either got all fives when there was really no real basis or SMART goals attached to that. So we really wanted to make sure that our managers were doing their jobs, developing SMART goals, and also making sure that they were having regular conversations with their employees, and making sure that at the end of the year, people weren't surprised by their ratings. And so we have really taken a strong effort, again, with Adrian, her team, with Jerica and our mission support folks, that this is HR, and I call HR and finance really the backbone of the agency, because if you don't get administration right, then everything else sort of falls apart. And I think when I started, it wasn't in the right place. And fortunately, I have people now in those positions who are very, very, very focused on it, and I think are doing what's in the best interest of HSEMA, but also of district residents and our government.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to talk more about kind of emergency preparedness and some of the lessons learned from January 6th, which of course HSEMA played a major role in helping keep the district safe that day, and also has been stated had access to information kind of in advance of that date. And so now, with over 2 years behind us, can you talk about some of HSEMA's actions, not just leading up to January 6th, but what you've learned since, to make sure that we are better prepared in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say that we were, as a city, very prepared. We as soon as we had begun to see that there were indications of violence that could occur on January 6th, we convened the mayor, the police chief, and we began to posture ourselves and to brace ourselves for what it was we were seeing. January 6th, I've said this publicly to the January 6th committee as well, was not an intelligence failure. The intelligence was there. Our fusion center, we saw it with specific references to the Capitol. I think the failure that happened on that day was that some of our federal partners were not postured to the intelligence that we were all seeing. And those could be for a variety of reasons. But I do think going forward, and what we've learned in the last 2 years is that we are even closer now to our federal partners. We have, for example, a liaison that sits at U.S. Capitol Police and has access. to U.S. Capitol Police intelligence officers who are seeing intel come in, and we can share, and we can make operational and preparedness decisions based on that intelligence. We didn't have that previously. We've also doubled down on our relationships with the FBI and with the Washington field office, particularly as they look at domestic terrorism. Our analysts have been involved in assisting the FBI with investigations into the January 6th attack. We're constantly supporting the Metropolitan Police Department, which is our most important partner in the Fusion Center at the city level, to make sure that they also have the intelligence that we're seeing. We've invested a lot in looking at social media and looking at indicators of violence. People say they want to bring guns into the district. They make threats against elected members of Congress or city leadership. We can flag that for the appropriate law enforcement authority. So I mentioned previously earlier about the tabletop exercise that we did. with our federal partners. The more we know how they can respond and what they will respond with and what their limitations are and their challenges are, the better the city can prepare. But I want to just state for the record, on the city side, we were prepared. We were ready with messaging. As you know, MPD and Fire and EMS were fully mobilized on January 6th. It was MPD that led the clearing of the Capitol building, along with some of our regional partners. And it was the mayor of the District of Columbia that was the first elected official to speak to not just to the city, but to the American people that day. So we were ready and we were postured. And I think in the future, what we're really doing is making sure we're on the same page as our federal partners.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about as it relates to preparation that you'd like to share or highlight? Or as it relates to anything you're working on this year?
I don't think so. I'm looking around the table, people are saying no, but we do, Chairwoman, look forward to having you come tour our new facility so you can see the breadth and extent of what it is we've built over the last couple of years to better prepare the city for all threats and hazards.
Thank you. I will take you up on that and would love to come for tour soon. Is it accurate that that facility will be up and running later this year? What's the timeline for that?
So we will begin moving, we call it sort of our vanguard, our first employees will start moving in there next month. We will begin to kick the tires on the facility for the next 5 months as we lead into the July 4th activation. We'll run our first full-scale activation out of there on July 4th with a plan to have all our employees over there by the beginning of the next fiscal year. So October 1st, we should have our entire staff there.
Got it. Okay. Looking forward to that. Well, thank you very much to you, Director, for your testimony and being here today and your leadership of HSEMA. I want to thank your entire staff for all of your tireless work and really looking forward to working together this year to keep all district residents and visitors safe.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
All right, so that concludes the portion of this hearing on HSEMA. We are going to recess for 10 minutes. And then we will move on to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, where we will first hear from public witnesses. The time is now 11:24. We will reconvene at 11:35 a.m. Thank you all.